And welcome to the Fall Book Club. My name is Maverick Evans, and today we will be covering the last batch of chapters for A Farewell to Arms by Ernesthemingway. We have been having a ton of fun talk about this, and honestly, I have let the book review and book club discussion go on far too long. So I'm very happy to have it completed today, and at some point in the future, I will also be discussing in a much shorter video, I'm sure, the several movies in comparison to the book. So I actually haven't seen the movies yet, and I don't even know if they're out there. I'm pretty sure that there's at least one. I think it's an old 60s movie, but we'll be talking about those and the similarities, the different ways that it paid homage to the book, or the ways that it disgraced it. So that'll be a lot of fun. And just to remind you guys, in the first part of this video, if you're watching on YouTube, there will be show notes and timestamps in the description below for chapter headings and different topics for you to find there and like anchor yourself. So if you want to use those, feel free to do so. They're there for you. And also tomorrow at some point, we will be having a conversation with a buddy of mine. His name on Twitch is Ironic in Iconic, and his real name is David. He's a good friend of mine from Canada, and we will be discussing The Most Dangerous Game, which is a short story. So if you're watching this like today, then you can go ahead and read up on it very quickly, easily. You can read it in, I don't know, like an hour or something like that. So it's not a difficult read, and it's thrilling. It's really, really thrilling. So I'm very excited for that conversation. And the day after that, no, maybe Saturday or Friday or Sunday, one of the days of the weekend, we will be having the full discussion with the full book club for the second to last book conversation for Ken Kesey's One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which is going to be really awesome. Honestly, I've been loving it a ton. It's been one of my favorite stories that we have read so far, and I'm excited to see if we can try and get all four of us in the same room, because for some reason we've just been kind of we've been having like one person gone there, one person gone here. So yeah, that'll be a lot of fun. And then who knows, after that we'll be drawn for new books after that. And if you have any suggestions for books that you would like me to read for the solo discussions, any short stories that you'd like me and David to talk about, or any books for the whole group, the whole book club, to discuss in the quad conversations, go ahead and put those in the description below. And as for the quad conversations, I don't mind reading longer books, and David and I like to stick to short stories because that's kind of our thing that we've started doing. And but for the quad conversations, if you want to suggest books for that, then the ones that we prefer to choose are going to be ones that are equal to or greater than 300 words, not 300 words, 300 pages, I'm sorry, have at least one or more film adaptations, and are widely considered classic literature. So keep to those, and we'll be able to put them into the hat and draw for them. I'm sure you can't go wrong with a lot of the classic literature that's out there, but some of them are huge. I mean, come on, I know Leo Tolstoy is like classic, but that dude writes tons, very prolific. His books are huge. So yeah, anyway, let's get right into it and start our discussion to finish A Farewell to Arms. So we're going to start back with chapter 3, because that's kind of where we left off with the last video. So just as a refresher, I'll read the summarization here, say a few things about it, and then lead into the new chapters that we haven't heard yet. So the chapter 30. Crossing a bridge, Henry sees a German staff car crossing another bridge nearby. Amo soon spots a heavily armed bicycle troop. Fearing capture, Henry and the men decide to avoid the main road, which the retreat follows, and head for the smaller secondary roads. They start down an embankment and are shot at. A bullet hits Amo and kills him almost instantly. Realizing that their friend has been shot by their own troops, the Italian rear guard, Henry and his men realize that they are in more danger than they would be facing the enemy. They look for a place to hide until dark and come across an abandoned farmhouse. Henry camps out in the hayloft while Piani and Bonello search for food. Piani returns alone and reports that Bonello, fearing death, left the farm in hopes of being taken prisoner and thereby escaping death. The men hide in the barn until nightfall and then set out to rejoin the Italians. They come upon a large gathering of soldiers where officers are being separated and interrogated for treachery that lead to an Italian defeat. Suddenly, two men from the battle police seize hold of Henry. He watches as a lieutenant colonel is led away, questioned, and shot to death. Sensing the opportunity to escape, Henry runs and dives into an ice-cold river. As he swims away, he hears shots, but as he gets farther away, the sounds of gunfire fade. So, Chapter 30 was quite a good place to stop for our last discussion. We have all kinds of things happening right now for Henry. He is just getting in worse and worse situations as the days go on. Within like two days, I mean, he has lost one of his own soldiers. Another one, he left to be a POW. He just decided to abandon everybody and leave. So he went rogue, and he's lost almost all of his men. I think he has one more soldier at his side, and you know, all he has is Piani. That's all he's got. And then as soon as he does get back to his own army and finds the Italian army, they are separating out officers and saying that if you aren't with your troops or whatever it was, various ridiculous reasons, the Italian police soldiers decided to start rounding up officers and shooting them in the head. So things have gotten really terrible for Henry really fast. And so we'll see how he deals with all of this in a moment now. We obviously know that he jumped into the ice-cold river in an effort to escape because he was about to be one of those officers that were shot in the head. And so, yeah, I mean, honestly, he's doing what he can to survive. And this portion of the book for me was one of those parts where you just can't even believe what's happening. It was a page turner to say the least, and it's just a point in the book where it kind of like it's a very good point for readers, people who love to read, because it's just that euphoric moment where, despite the fact that the events in the book aren't happy or good at all or desirable necessarily, it's more like you get drawn into the book and you kind of forget that the rest of the world exists. So if you're looking for escapism, this is one of those really heightened experiences as far as the story goes that just hooks you in and you want to read a couple chapters after that. So yeah, this was a very vivid chapter, and you could see everything that was going on. It gets your heart racing, and that is going to lead us into chapter 31. Now, Henry's floating in the ice-cold water in the river. He tries to avoid the gunshots, and he does. He luckily doesn't get hit. And after a short while of just floating downstream, he decides to, well, I can't see anybody and can't hear anyone, so it's time to get out. He's drenched to the bone and begins removing his clothes in order to get the cold water off of him and gain some warmth. So that's like, for any of you guys who get in that kind of situation, yeah, first things first, get all your clothes off, wring them out. And after, while he's still naked, he takes his jacket in hand and tears his officer stars off of his jacket and puts them in the jacket pocket so that he won't be easily identified as an officer, despite the fact that I'm pretty sure that the jacket that he wears is officer specific. So like you wouldn't necessarily know that he is like a higher ranking officer, but you would know that he was an officer. because I think that there were subtle differences in the uniforms between, like, you know, the regular soldiers and him, and especially between, I guess, the medics, the ambulance drivers and whatnot. So Henry then jumps on a train car stocked with weaponry and lays down to rest. A soldier walks by and sees him, but assumes that he belongs there and keeps walking without saying anything. When Henry crawls under one of the tarps covering the weapons, he hits his head, cutting it open. He worries this cut might make him look more suspicious, so he allows the blood to dry and picks it off in an attempt to look more aloof. So, oh man, this is a really kind of sullen chapter. It's kind of just the wet dog, sorry for himself kind of moment, because he is just losing on all fronts. He had to tear his own rank off that he worked pretty hard to get, and his own military has tried to kill him, and now he's stressed out because he's considered a deserter as well. So, and it's very cinematic, this moment where, and I think that Hemingway did such a great job depicting this little series of actions where the soldier is patrolling and walks by and looks Henry straight in the face, and for several sentences, I mean, you're really just convinced that this is about to end very terribly. He's either going to get shot and killed, arrested, and, you know, thrown in prison for desertion. But none of that happens. He just walks on by, which we can see things like that. Those kinds of sequences occur in movies all the time and stories all the time today. So again, it's really cool to try and recognize things that happen in the classic literature that we can read, and then draw parallels from those as like the instigator or the seed for everyone, and draw parallels to, you know, more modern works of storytelling. So yeah, he's just looking to get some rest, because at this point, I mean, he's exhausted. I doubt he got much sleep when he was in the barn the previous night, and he's just ready to go to bed. And when he crawls under the tarp, he just freaking hits his forehead right onto a piece of metal and cuts it wide open. Ugh. Like, he can't catch a break. He just really cannot catch a break at any point. It's so unfortunate. And again, I do think that it's a good, like, little detail in there that Henry starts worrying about whether or not he'll look suspicious, because he is sopping wet and, like, has a dirty uniform, and also he has, like, is covered in blood on his face now. So and I don't know, like, everybody's always been walking around in their living room or something like that and then, like, stub their toe, and how frustrating that is. Imagine, like, going through everything that he just went through and then smacking your head on a piece of metal and cutting it open. I mean, that's even worse. That's way worse than stubbing your toe on the coffee table. So, all right. Chapter 32. Henry lays exhausted under the canvas and thinks about his reconstructed knee and how great a job Dr. Valentini did so that he can work his knee the way that he is without failing, which is something that I thought about too. I was like, wow. I was like, while he was doing all that and running and swimming and stuff, I was like, man, that reconstructed knee, it's really holding up. That thing is quality work. That is some Ace Hardware you know, type tool right there with their metal knee. He's like a bionic man. Dr. Valentini did him up good, and in like 2 weeks. That procedure was pretty impressive. Like, I don't know if it's just me, but I'm pretty impressed whenever, like, there's, like, you know, minor or major surgical procedures that go on, and then, like, recovery rates are, like, super fast, despite the fact that, like we said in previous discussions, that Henry was basically just a raging alcoholic that drank way too much wine, basically, and gave himself jaundice. So, and despite all that, his knee healed up fairly well. So, good on him, I guess. He reflects that his thoughts still belong to him and thinks about Catherine, though he realizes that thinking about her without promise of seeing her might drive him crazy, so he decides to suppress any thought of her until he has an opportunity to see her in person. Yeah, so this is just a moment for him to reflect on everything that's happening, despite all of the terrible things that have occurred and he's gotten himself into, he kind of has this moment of bliss where he has a few seconds to just breathe and think about everything. And I think also in this portion of the chapter, we get a lot of description of the landscape passing him by and everything that he gets to see, how the air feels and the smells that he has. So you can definitely tell that this is a moment that Henry is using to recoup, to reground himself, and to fortify his spirit whenever, these burdening thoughts of his loved one start creeping into his brain. And so he, represses all of that and tries to stuff it down so that it doesn't burden him anymore. Whether that's going to work or not, I don't know. It seems like men are pretty good at compartmentalizing things and like putting things in boxes. So maybe he's capable of that. So thoughts of loss plague him. Quote, "It's not my show anymore," he ruminates. Soon, though, the needs of his body distract him from these thoughts. He needs to eat, drink, and sleep with Catherine, whom he dreams of taking away to a safe place. I have a note in here, and it says, he almost died and he's still horny. Legendary sex drive. He explicitly talks about how he wants to basically, of course, I think I've said this multiple times, that all the romance and sexual content of the book are very tasteful. None of it is explicit for the most part, and also none of it is vulgar or derogatory in any way. So it's very tasteful in its presentation, but that does not mean that this man did not just like think about like, oh man, just wish I could have sex with Catherine. Man, my forehead's cut open. Multiple of my soldiers are probably dead. One's dead for sure. One's a POW. I almost got killed. I'm freezing. Hey, I guess that does make sense though. Really, if you want to, but because, and that's funny too, because just a moment ago in his thought process, he was like, I'm never going to think about her. And then he's like, oh, I want to have sex with her. So I just think it's hilarious. Like Henry's thought process is just bouncing all over the place, But I guess it makes sense though. If you were going to think of anything, that would be it, right? What would make things better? A warm bed and a warm woman, right? So that would fix all of his woes at this moment. Chapter 33. Henry gets off the train when it enters Milan. He goes to a wine shop and has a cup of coffee. The proprietor offers to help him, but Henry assures the man that he is in no trouble. The proprietor's like, listen, man, do you need any help? Because he's looking a little rough. After they share a glass of wine together, Henry goes to the hospital, where he learns from the porter that Catherine has left to Stresa. He goes to visit Ralph Simmons, one of the opera singers that he encounters earlier, and asks about the procedures for traveling to Switzerland. Simmons, offering whatever help he can, gives Henry a suit of civilian clothes and sends him off to Stresa with best wishes. That's like really awesome. I love to see, there's multiple points in here where we just really get to see the great good sides of people and their potential for charity and goodwill and love. And so that's like really great, especially in contrast with a lot of the darker images and darker sequences that we get to see from people. Whether the Italian police soldiers get out of hand and start executing people for trumped up claims, or whatever it is that we might see in the future. Just really good. It's a breath of fresh air for this guy to just decide to give over to Henry his own clothes, which are probably pretty expensive because they're nicer clothes, and he's a stranger. Like, he doesn't know who he is. And in addition to that, I'm almost positive that anybody would look at Henry and know that he's a deserter because, one, he has like frayed stuff where his rank should be, and he is not fighting on the front, which everyone should be right now, because everyone knows that there was a big battle that just went on between the Germans and the Italians and the rest of the Allies. So, and on that one too, that's kind of conflicting as well, because the war that they're going through is one of the more popular ones. So it is odd to me that he would be in support of a soldier that he's almost positive is a deserter. So I don't know. Maybe he wasn't in favor of the war. Maybe he's looking forward to it being over. He's just a sympathizer. He's just an all-over good guy. No matter who needs help, give him the help. So, chapter 34. Henry takes the train to Stresa. So he's trying to track down Catherine. He feels odd in his new clothes, noticing the scornful looks that he receives as a young civilian. Yeah, kind of what I was getting at a second ago, was that everyone is giving him nasty, nasty looks, dogging him, mad dogging him, because he's a young man and he's a civilian in civilian clothes. So I don't think that anyone suspects that he is necessarily a deserter or necessarily. They might think he's a draft dodger, but I think more so they just think that whatever reason he didn't go and fight, maybe it was an actual like a logistic type of thing, to where, you know, certain people weren't required and it was like up to them because of something. I don't know, but they are mad dogging this boy. So still, he claims that such looks do not bother him, for he has made a separate peace with the war. The train arrives in Stresa, and Henry heads for a hotel called the Isle Borromées. He takes a nice room and tells the concierge that he is expecting his wife. In the bar, Emilio, the bartender, reports that he has seen 2 English nurses staying at a small hotel near the train station. Henry eats, but does not answer Emilio's questions about the war, which he reflects is over for him. So here's another point for Henry, which is pretty cool too, that he's able to just go ahead and try and understand the situation for what it is, and you know, kind of consider that what happened with his own army, his own police soldiers attempting to execute him, has, in his mind, exempted him from the war from here on out. He's no longer a soldier. His military kicked him out, attempted to literally kill him. So I think that for him, he's kind of considered that he swore to lay his life down for the Italian army, and he did so. He gave it. They tried to take it. I think he just considers it that he gave one life, and now he gets to live the rest of it out. And, you know, so the fact that he can have peace about that is really cool, and that he's not, I mean, outwardly upset about it. So this is a bit of a longer chapter. Catherine and Helen Ferguson are having supper when Henry arrives at their hotel. While Catherine is overjoyed, Helen becomes angry and berates Henry for making such a mess of her friend's life. Neither Henry nor Catherine yields to Helen's stern moralizing, and soon Helen begins to cry. First of all, Helen is so annoying. I've said it once, I'll say it many times. I freaking hate Helen. She's super stupid and just makes a muck of everyone's life worse than they do themselves. Like, no one wants to hear all of the crap that she spouts continually. All she does is whine and moan and make situations that are bad worse. So if we could just kick Helen to the curb, please, that would be nice. Also, she like deliberately gets in the way of Catherine and Henry's relationship, which, in my opinion, was one of the things that drove them together more than anything. So, yeah. Good job, Helen, you idiot. You stupid. Let's see. Neither Henry nor Catherine yields to Helen's stern moralizing, and soon Helen begins to cry. Ah, cry baby. Henry describes the night spent with Catherine. He has returned to a state of bliss. though his thoughts are darkened by the knowledge that the world breaks everyone and that good people die impartially. Obviously, this is a callback to whenever his soldiers were killed and Amo was shot. So I guess now, despite him thinking that he has a separate piece about the war, he kind of doesn't. And instead, he is kind of looking for a way to express all these dark emotions that he has, and this is coming out whenever he's with Catherine. To me, it just seems like he's attempting to escape things, escape the thoughts and the feelings of it all by, enveloping himself with the presence of Catherine, this warm love, and, fleshly indulgence, and it's just not working super well. Especially whenever, you do have that intimate person and you use them as an escape. One, that's not good. You should probably just deal with your problems. Two, that intimate relationship in and of itself is a call that tries to call out those things that are worrying you and downtrodden you. And so the more that he is with her, the more he has an opportunity to kind of confess and, receive catharsis by talking about his problems. So in the morning, Henry refuses the newspaper, and Catherine asks if his experience was so bad that he cannot bear to read about it. He promises to tell her about it someday if he ever gets it straight in his head, as he says. He admits to feeling like a criminal for abandoning the army, but Catherine jokingly assures him that he is no criminal. After all, she says, it was only the Italian army. They agree that taking off for Switzerland would be lovely and return to bed. So again, we're seeing different conflicts of thought and feeling from Henry, because previously he had stated to other people and himself that he had a separate kind of peace about the war and that it was over for him. Yet at the same time, he's feeling pressed down upon by those dark experiences that he had by losing his troop abandoning everyone to go be a POW. These things are weighing down on him, and in addition to that, he feels guilty because there's a kind of camaraderie about being in the military, and that brotherly dedication and commitment is what keeps a lot of people there. And so if you, by circumstance, are basically forced out, he was either going to have to leave or die. So he didn't have much of a choice here. But despite that, he still feels bad for leaving the army. And that in and of itself, I think, is just a really good sign about Henry, that he is a noble kind of guy and that he does have honor about him. And so, there it is. But their answer in this situation, of course, is to create a vision of the future, which is good, that they're going to go to Switzerland, and then an immediate gratification, which is a return to bed to have the sexy time. So, there we go. Chapter 35. Later that morning, Catherine goes to see Helen, and Henry goes fishing with Emilio. This is a good situation. We kind of have some reprieve here. We're no longer talking about emotionally heavy subjects, and we're also not experiencing, anything close to death in tragedy. So this is nice. Catherine goes to see her friend, although she's annoying, and Henry gets to go out fishing with a friend, Emilio. So Emilio offers to lend Henry his boat at any time. Henry and Catherine eat lunch with Helen Ferguson, Count Greffy, a 94-year-old nobleman whom Henry befriends on an earlier trip to Stresa, is also at the hotel with his niece. That evening, Henry plays billiards with the Count. They talk about how the Count mistakenly thought religious devotion would come with age, and about whether Italy will win the war. So, this is a really cool chapter that definitely stuck out to me whenever I was reading it. And one of the main reasons for that is because of what is his name? The nobleman, the 94-year-old nobleman, Count Greffy. So Count Greffy is it's such an interesting interaction between Henry and this older man. First of all, 94-year-old guy is really old. That's pretty old for this time, because I think the average life expectancy was much lower than it is today, or at least I would assume it is. And so we get this moment of reprieve in the first part of this chapter with the fishing and the socialization among friends and stuff, and that's pretty good. And then once the night kind of winds down, we have Henry making his way into the billiard room, which is kind of the main lobby. I think there's a bar there and various chairs and tables and billiard tables. So Count Greffy, in my opinion, the way that I see it, he just seems like an older version of Henry. Like it just seems like you aged Henry by like 70 years, and then this is what you got. You got Count Greffy, because almost all of his own opinions seem very similar to Henry's. He's kind of agnostic. I feel like he doesn't really know what kind of religion he is. They both seem to want faith, and they both state clearly in their conversation with one another that they wish that faith had come to them, but it just never did. So if I had to impose my own meaning on this, and I had to interpret, what this means outside of the author's intent, because that's one thing that I always try and keep in mind with almost every piece of literature, unless it's too propagandized, is that the meaning that the author had in mind when he wrote the material is of little importance whenever you consider what is the story, what does the story express, what does it say, what are the characters doing, and those things will have more importance than the intent. Because I think there are many things that unfold themselves in the stories, many things that nest themselves as archetypes and symbols and icons that the author just really had no idea about. He just put them in there because they occurred to him. And so those are cool things. What I think is happening in this interaction is that Henry is able to consult his older self and kind of get a look into the future, what waits for him, and consult a sage at the same time. I think he's a wise man in comparison, but also maybe the lack thereof. Maybe he isn't a wise man, and that's just kind of what Henry, because he's kind of weird after this interaction. Like he feels kind of strange after it, although he enjoyed the conversation. So I think that one of the messages here is that maybe faith isn't something that is just bestowed upon you. And I think that there's plenty of literature, if you want to cite any, like even stuff other than the Bible, like just go read some Kierkegaard and you'll realize that faith is mostly a decision. That in Kierkegaard's viewpoint, he thinks that faith should be endorsed and welcomed blindly, that you should walk into God's hands without any concrete knowledge of being saved, that you just do it because that's what you're supposed to do, despite any belief or anything like that. Regardless of if you believe or not, doesn't matter. All that matters is that you have faith. And so I think that's what Henry continues to fail to have. And I think that as he goes through the story, Henry is looking very diligently. He's very, very attentive to the world around him, looking for some concrete evidence to support this kind of existential crisis that he's experiencing. So I think that's kind of what this conversation opens up. Part of it just opens Henry up to these ideas, and the sad part about it is that it just reaffirms a lot of the things that he already believed in, and those things, as far as I can see, aren't helping him at all. So we'll go on to chapter 36. Later that night, Emilio wakes Henry to inform him that the military police plan to arrest Henry in the morning. Now we're back into the action. More racing hearts. He suggests that Henry and Catherine row to Switzerland. Henry wakes Catherine, and they pack and head down to the dock. Emilio stocks them up with brandy and sandwiches and lets them take the boat. He takes 50 lire for the provisions and tells Henry to send him 500 francs for the boat after he is established in Switzerland. So, oh my gosh, this is like another action point, because it's just like a huge flash of a chapter where like the news is given. He has a serious conversation with Emilio about what's going to happen. The police are coming. They're going to arrest him, and he needs to flee immediately. So it's the dead of night. I'm pretty sure it's raining, and it's very dramatic, very cinematic if you were to like see it in your mind's eye, and is an absolute rush of a chapter. It's very invigorating. So they managed to escape, right? A lot of action, not a ton of like storytelling type stuff going on. Okay, chapter 37. Because of a storm, the waters are choppy and rough. Henry rows all night until his hands are dull with pain. This is an intense scene as well. I mean, honestly, chapter 6 was just beginning to ramp up. And at chapter 37, you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know what's going to happen here. We're on the edge the whole time, because Henry is struggling very hard to continue rowing. And Catherine at some point takes a short-term rowing to just relieve him for a moment, but then he just continues on. And he does this for hours. And for all that time while they were rowing, they managed to stay out of sight of like any customs guards. And they finally, after so long, like you have no idea whether this is going to work out or not. Like you just think, oh, they're going to drown. I mean, that's what's going to happen. Or they're going to, I don't know, but it's terrible. His hands were destroyed after this. But alas, they land on Switzerland. They're there on the shore. They pull the boat up and manage to stumble into a diner, and they eat breakfast there. And as they expected and was according to plan, the Swiss guards arrest them and take them to Locarno, where they receive provisional visas to remain in Switzerland. Whoa, that's so freaking cool. That's a very Switzerland thing to do. You've invaded our country as aliens. Here are some visas. And this is a good part too. Like, this is kind of one of the more rejuvenating chapters in the book, because the guards at this point argue really comically over where the couple will find the best winter sport. And you know, they kind of bicker back and forth, kind of clownishly, talking to one another, and it's pretty enjoyable. And they kind of decide where they're going to stay and where they would like to live. And you know, Henry and Catherine are relieved but tired, and they finally just go to a hotel and they immediately fall asleep. So that brings us to chapter 38. Oh man, we're rearing in on this one. By fall, Henry and Catherine have moved to a wooden house on a mountainside, the village of Montreuil. I think that's how you say that, don't know. They have a splendid life together, enjoying the company of Mr. Göttingen and his wife, who live downstairs, and taking frequent walks into the peaceful nearby villages. So by this point, I mean, the opening of chapter 38 is basically just a fairy tale. Like, it's just beautiful. Everything is gorgeous. It's all perfect. And there is nothing wrong in the world at this point. They've gotten away from all of the countries that are warring with one another. Henry has managed to escape persecution, or I guess justice from his own government that he abandoned, and things are good. So yeah, it's just a beautiful scene here. One day after Catherine has her hair done in town, the couple goes out for a beer, which Catherine believes will help keep the baby small. Oh my gosh. This book is filled with all kinds of things that happen between Catherine and her unborn child that are terrible. She smokes and drinks beer in order to keep the baby small because the doctor told her that her pelvis is too small, that she has too small a hip, a birth canal. The ignorance. Terrible. Well, you know what? I just got these small hips. You know what I'd do about that? I'd smoke a couple stogs and, have a few brews. And then that'll shrink the baby so that it'll fit right through my birthing canal. That's the answer. No! Don't ever do that. Everyone knows not to do that anymore. During this time, it may not have been common knowledge. Catherine has been increasingly worried about the baby's size since the doctor warned her that she has a narrow pelvis. Again, Henry and Catherine discuss marriage. Catherine agrees to marry someday because it will make the child legitimate, but she prefers to talk about the sights that she hopes to see. So she's kind of like, diverting the conversation away from the more serious topics. And despite the fact that she agrees to the fact that she wants to get married, it doesn't seem like a point that she wants to discuss very much, which again, for me, red flag. So the sites that she wants to see, such as Niagara Falls and the Golden Gate Bridge, when the marriage makes her an American. So she's looking forward to that. She wants citizenship there in America, because if you remember, despite the fact that Henry was an ambulance officer for the Italian army, he is an American soldier. And I also decided, after thinking about it, and I also realized that he is not the son of a president. That one dude just said that in the beginning of the book so that he could get faster medical attention. Brilliant. 3 days before Christmas, snow falls. Catherine asks Henry if he feels restless. He says no, though he does wonder about Rinaldi, the priest, and the men on the front. Catherine, suspecting that Henry might be restless, suggested that he change something to reinvigorate his life. Oh my gosh. Okay, so this is always like one of the things that a lot of people go toward. So like I noticed too that when people like say like someone breaks up with their significant other, or they get a divorce or something, like a lot of the times like one of them will get some like facial change, like they'll like cut their hair really short, or like dye it some different color, or shave their facial hair off, or something, or whatever it is. They'll do some kind of outward alteration to their appearance in order to account for the fact that they don't feel well. This seems to be the same logic that Catherine is attempting to use in order to make Henry feel better. This, in my experience, does not help at all. It's just superficial, doesn't assist. But if it works for you, that's fine. Just seems to me like it doesn't do anything to fix the initial root problem and just ignores it. That's like the same thing as like, oh, I feel bad, I'm gonna go buy, an ice cream. That doesn't fix your issues. That just makes you fat. So anyway, she says that he needs to reinvigorate his life. He agrees to grow a beard, which is kind of cool. Catherine suggests that she cut her hair to make her look more like Henry, but Henry doesn't like that idea. Yeah, I mean, who wouldn't? Who would like that idea? Like, that doesn't seem like that seems weird. If I had a wife that was telling me, hey, I want to cut my hair so that I look more like you, how do you think about that idea? I'd be like, what? What the hell do you mean by that? You want to look like me? That's so freaking strange. Anyway, I'll digress on that one. When she proposes that they try to fall asleep together at the same time, which is like really gooey type love stuff. Let's fall asleep together at the same time. Yeah, good try. I feel like I always fall asleep first at all times. I would beat anybody. I would always fall asleep first, like a rock. I just go lay down. As soon as my head hits the pillow, unconscious. Might be a medical condition. Who knows? But Henry is unable to fall asleep and lies awake looking at Catherine and thinking for a long time. Yeah, he pulls like an Edward Cullen where he just like stares at her while she's going to sleep. That's a nice, kind of sullen a little bit because you know that something's a little wrong with Henry. He's not feeling too well about like his psyche probably, and he's just kind of sitting there in silence. All right, chapter 39. By mid-January, Henry's beard has come in fully. Heck yeah, beard gang. While out on a walk, he and Catherine stop at a dark, smoky inn. They relish their isolation and wonder if things will be spoiled when the little brat comes. Why do they call it a little brat? It's so sad. You're already calling it a little brat, and it hasn't even been born yet. Great attitude. Catherine says that she will cut her hair when she's thin again after the baby is born so that she can be exciting and Henry can fall in love with her all over again. So we see explicitly here that with these characters, that Catherine especially is hooked on the feeling of that initial love. And she seems to be like harping pretty hard on wanting to alter their looks so that they become essentially new people to fall in love with all over again. So instead of attempting to rejuvenate this long-term relationship, she instead wants to try and, I guess come under her own kind of delusion that these are new people, that they're each a new person, and that they can fall in love all over again. A little weird. So in response, Henry tells her that he loves her enough now and asks, "What do you want to do? Ruin me?" Yeah, he's not too keen on the whole idea. So this is another pretty good scene in there. I think also by mid-January, first of all, that's like summer, but I think at that point, yeah, it's just like a beautiful landscape. Ernest Hemingway gives a lot of credit to his surroundings and the landscapes and what everything looks like. And despite me personally not really liking a lot of detail and like an overabundant amount of detail in the books I read, they're pretty serene. So the way that he did it was tasteful and brief for the most part. So we will let it pass. Now we're into chapter 40. In March, the couple moves to the town of Lausanne to be nearer to the hospital. They stay in a hotel there for 3 weeks, and Catherine buys baby clothes. Henry exercises in the gym, and both feel that the baby will come soon, and that therefore they should not lose any time together. So this is kind of like the calm before the storm. They're doing all of the necessary and responsible things to prepare for the child's coming, and that's about it. It's more action, and then we get into chapter 41. So around 3 o'clock one morning, Catherine goes into labor. Henry takes her to the hospital, where she is given a nightgown and a room. She encourages Henry to go out for breakfast, which he does. When he returns to the hospital, he finds that Catherine has been taken to the delivery room. He goes in to see her. The doctor stands by as Catherine inhales an anesthetic gas to get her through the painful contractions. Later that afternoon, when Henry returns from lunch, Catherine has been intoxicated from the gas and has made little progress in her labor. So this is one of the most stressful points in the book. And it's definitely leading up to a climax. You can tell. And, like, really, this whole thing, especially from a more modern medical perspective, like if you have more knowledge on the modern medical procedures that the doctors take in your treatment for, like, a pregnancy and delivery, all of this just sounds wacky. Like the fact that she's on gas and stuff, which I guess is not that weird because people use, like they put like a needle in your spine for, the pain and everything. But I just, it's just so weird because of the gas and everything. Anyway, of course, like if you're high on the gas, how are you going to be able to push the kid out? Like it doesn't make any sense. So, the doctor tells Henry that the best solution, now that she's basically intoxicated on the gas, would be a cesarean operation. So, the reason that this happened too is that she turned the gas up too far. Like, she was like, oh, it hurts really bad, just give me more gas. And I'm pretty sure that they just turned it up farther than it was supposed to be. So this, like, is entirely her fault. And Henry's fault, partially because I think he agreed to let her do that. So, dumb. Okay, so the doctor, they're going to do a cesarean operation. The doctor soon comes out. The doctor soon comes out with a baby boy, for whom Henry, strangely, has no feelings. Henry sees the doctor fussing over the child, but he rushes off to see Catherine without speaking to him. So this is weird. I mean, and I don't know because I'm not a parent, but I would just have to assume from the stories that I've heard of my own birth and of other people's births that whenever your child is born, the first thing that you would like to do is see that child, right? But no. Henry instead runs right past his son, his newborn son, and goes to see Catherine. So when Catherine asks about their son, Henry tells her that he is fine. He didn't even check on him. The nurse gives him a quizzical look. Ushering him outside, the nurse explains that the umbilical cord had strangled the child prior to birth. Oh. There are very few books that I have read that really gut me. Like, they just make a pit in the bottom of my stomach, and it just feels endless, if that makes sense. When I read that sentence, that their child had been strangled by its own umbilical cord, I just couldn't make any sense of it. I was very shocked, and the effect that the book had on me in that moment was immense. It's terrible. So Henry goes out for dinner, and when he returns, the nurse tells him that Catherine is hemorrhaging, which is something that happens with childbirth. And I'm assuming it's much more dangerous at that time than it is now. Not sure if they've. I'm sure that they have increased and bettered their death prevention from hemorrhaging. But I do think that that's still relatively dangerous for even like today's standards. And Henry obviously is terrified that she's gonna die, and rightly so. When he's finally allowed to see her, she tells him that she will die, and asks him not to say the things that he once said to her to other girls. He stays with her until she dies, and once she is dead, he attempts to say goodbye, but cannot find the sense in doing so. He leaves the hospital and walks back to his hotel in the rain. So that's the end of the book. And it's really disturbing. And the ending of the book has made its way into different pop cultures, different movies. If you watched the movie with Robert De Niro, Silver Linings Playbook, there's a scene in there where the main character is reading A Farewell to Arms, and he throws it out the window when he gets to the last page. And that's kind of how I felt too, is that it was just, and I didn't feel angry about it. It was just so sad because stuff like that happens. Occasionally you go through the world and everything is taken from you, and there's really nothing that you can do about it. And I don't even know what Henry's next move would be on his part. How do you even try and deal or cope with that? What's your next move? How do you process what has just happened? That both the love of your life and your newborn son are both dead within 5 minutes of each other. I don't know. I have no idea. So to even try and make any conjecture about what happens in a theoretical chapter 42 is impossible. I mean, I have no idea what happened. Like, I mean, maybe he kills himself. I don't know. Maybe he's very upset for a long time. And then eventually he gets better. That seems to me like the best case scenario. So, like, just going through it again is honestly just really emotional for me, because the book just does that good a job. Ernest Hemingway does that good a job with this whole story. I mean, the character development was there to make you feel for these characters, and when the rug gets pulled out from under you, man, you're on the floor. And this is one of the main reasons that this is a very classic and legendary piece of literature. And if you haven't read it, even if you have listened to the ending here as I've summarized it, go read it. So, man, golly, how long have we been? We've been almost talking for a whole hour. Okay, all right. So, okay, just to remind you guys, there are timestamps and show notes in the description below. If you want to use those, feel free to do so. They'll have chapter headings and subject headings. Okay, those are great, especially if you're a student trying to read the whole story and stuff, right? In addition, we do live streams of this from time to time on Twitch. If you want to find me, that right there, Small Armadillo, that's my name on Twitch. Okay. We will be discussing The Most Dangerous Game tomorrow at some point, so keep an eye out. And then on Saturday, we will be discussing the second to last, I think, part 3 of Ken Kesey's One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. So there you go. And that's about it. Make suggestions for us to read more books. Put book suggestions in the comments below. Tell me what you thought about the book, if you have a similar experience with this story. And yeah. Man, what a roller coaster. Honestly, this was wild and traumatizing.